Once upon a time, there was a girl named Peace. She had no home, no family, and no place to rest her head. She walked aimlessly along the road, her feet bruised from the long journey, her stomach empty, and her heart heavy with sorrow. For days, she wandered without direction. The world felt vast and unkind, but she had no choice but to keep moving. Hunger gnawed at her, but she refused to beg. She needed a place to stay, a way to survive. One day, as she walked past a large restaurant, the scent of delicious food filled her nostrils, her stomach twisted in longing. She stood by the entrance, watching people go in and out, their faces lit with joy as they enjoyed their meals. Gathering her courage, Peace stepped inside. The owner, a tall man named Mr. Benson, stood behind the counter. He noticed the frail girl staring at the food and raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you?" he asked. Peace hesitated. "Please, sir, I need a job. I can cook, clean, anything." Mr. Benson studied her. He had seen many people come looking for work, but there was something different about this girl. She looked determined yet exhausted, as though life had drained every ounce of strength from her. "Do you know how to cook?" he asked. Peace nodded. "Yes, sir. Come back tomorrow," he said. "If you can cook well, I'll let you stay." That night, Peace slept with hope in her heart. The next day, she proved her worth. She cooked so well that customers kept asking for more. Mr. Benson was impressed and gave her a permanent job. She worked harder than anyone, cooking most of the meals and making sure everything was perfect, but she was always walking. Every time someone saw her, she was on her feet cooking, cleaning, or serving. Even in the middle of the night, she would wake up to check if everything was in place. The restaurant became her home. She slept there, worked there, and lived there. Then, one fateful day, everything changed. One evening, Peace was in a hurry to finish her chores. She picked up a bucket of water and walked to the entrance to pour it outside. She did not look before throwing the water. A loud scream filled the air. The water had splashed on a beautiful lady dressed in an expensive red gown. It was Sophia, a wealthy woman who frequently visited the restaurant with her fiancé, Nicholas. They were the restaurant's most valuable customers. "You foolish girl," Sophia shrieked, staring at her soaked dress in horror. Before Peace could react, a sharp slap landed across her face. "I'm sorry, Ma," Peace said quickly, her voice trembling. "I didn't see you." "Shut up," Sophia barked. "Do you know how expensive this dress is?" Peace lowered her head. "It was a mistake, Ma. Please forgive me." But Sophia was furious. She stormed inside and called for Mr. Benson. "Sack her," she demanded. Mr. Benson was taken aback. "Madam Sophia, please, it was an accident. Peace is a very hard-working girl." "I don't care," Sophia snapped. "If you don't fire her, my fiancé and I will never come here again." Mr. Benson's heart sank. Nicholas and Sophia were his most important customers. Without them, the restaurant would struggle. He looked at Peace, who stood silently, her head bowed. He sighed heavily. "Peace, I'm sorry," he said. "But you have to leave." Tears welled up in her eyes. She wanted to beg, to explain, but she knew it was useless. As she turned to leave, Mr. Benson called after her. "God will put you in a better place," he said. Peace nodded, wiped her tears, and walked out into the night. Weeks passed. Peace had nowhere to stay. She returned to walking the streets, hungry and tired. One afternoon, as she trudged along the road, a black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, and a man inside stared at her. "Hey, aren't you the girl who used to work at Mr. Benson's restaurant?" he asked. Peace looked up. It was Nicholas, Sophia's fiancé. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, "but my boss sacked me." Nicholas frowned. "Why are you walking on the streets?" "I have nowhere to stay," Peace admitted. Nicholas was shocked. He had never imagined that the girl who cooked so well had no home. "Get in the car," he said. Peace hesitated. "Why, sir?" "I just want to talk," he assured her. She got in, and he drove to a quiet place. "Don't you have any family?" he asked. Peace sighed. "I am the only daughter of my parents. My parents died on the same day. My mother was sick in the hospital. My father went home to bring food for her, but on his way back, he had an accident and died. My mother heard the news and passed away immediately. I was left alone. After their burial, I started searching for a way to survive. That's how I found a job at the restaurant." Nicholas was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I'm sorry." Peace nodded. "Would you like to be my personal cook?" he asked. "Instead of me buying food from the restaurant, you can cook for me." Peace's eyes widened in surprise. She had no other option. so she quickly nodded. But nothing could prepare her for what happened next. When they arrived at Nicholas's house, the front door opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. It was Sophia. Their eyes met, and Sophia's face turned pale. Peace gasped. Fate had brought them together again. The moment Peace stepped into the grand mansion, her heart pounded. The house was enormous, far bigger than anything she had ever seen. The floors gleamed under the chandelier lights, and the air smelled of expensive perfume. But before she could take another step, a sharp voice cut through the air. What is she doing here? Peace flinched. Sophia stood at the top of the stairs, her expression dark with fury. She descended slowly, her heels clicking against the marble steps. Her arms were folded across her chest, her lips pressed into a thin line. Nicholas frowned, confused by her hostility. Sophia, what's wrong? He asked. I thought you'd be happy. Happy? Sophia let out a bitter laugh. You brought her into our home, after everything. Peace lowered her head, clutching the hem of her worn-out dress. She knew this wouldn't end well. Nicholas sighed and rubbed his temple. I don't understand. I employed her as our personal cook. That way, we won't need to buy food from the restaurant anymore. Sophia's eyes flashed. I don't want her here. Nicholas was taken aback. Sophia, that's unreasonable. We need her. No, you need her, Sophia spat. I don't. Silence stretched between them. Nicholas glanced at Peace, who stood frozen, her face pale. She looked as though she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Sophia, Nicholas said firmly. Peace is here to work, not to cause trouble. She's a good cook. You loved the food at the restaurant, didn't you? Sophia scoffed. I loved the food, not the cook. Nicholas shook his head. You're overreacting. Sophia's gaze darted between him and Peace. For a moment, it seemed as though she wanted to argue further, but she exhaled sharply and turned away. Fine, she muttered. Do whatever you want. But I don't want her anywhere near me. She stormed upstairs, leaving an uneasy silence in her wake. Nicholas turned to Peace and gave her an apologetic smile. Don't mind her. You can start work tomorrow. Peace nodded slowly, but her heart was heavy. She had a feeling that this was only the beginning of her troubles. The next morning, Peace woke up before sunrise and made her way to the kitchen. She wanted to prove her worth. She carefully selected fresh vegetables and spices, her hands working with skill and precision. Soon, the house was filled with the rich aroma of a well-prepared meal. Nicholas entered the dining room and smiled as he inhaled deeply. This smells amazing, he said. Peace blushed. Thank you, sir. Just then, Sophia walked in, still dressed in her silk nightgown. The moment she saw Peace standing by the table, her expression soured. She sat down without a word. Nicholas served her a plate and watched as she reluctantly took a bite. Her eyes widened slightly. Peace pretended not to notice. Even though Sophia hated her, she couldn't deny that the food was delicious. But instead of admitting it, she dropped her spoon noisily. I'm not hungry anymore, she said coldly. Nicholas sighed. Sophia, what's your problem? Sophia stood. My problem is her, she said, pointing at Peace. Peace's hands tightened into fists, but she kept quiet. Nicholas pinched the bridge of his nose. Sophia, stop acting childish. You don't have to like her. You just have to eat the food she makes. Sophia narrowed her eyes. Fine, but she stays out of my way. She left the dining room without another word. Peace swallowed hard. She knew Sophia wouldn't make things easy for her. Later that evening, Nicholas found Peace sitting outside on the veranda, staring at the sky. You seem lost in thought, he said, taking a seat beside her. Peace gave a small smile. I was just thinking about my parents. Nicholas leaned forward. Tell me about them. Peace hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she began. My mother was kind. My father was hard-working. We didn't have much, but we were happy. Her voice grew softer. Until that day. Nicholas remained silent, allowing her to continue. Everything I know today, I know it because of my parents. They were my strength and backbone. They made sure I never lacked anything. But then, her voice broke. Nicholas swallowed. They passed away. Peace nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I was left alone. After their burial, I had nowhere to go. I walked for days before I found the restaurant. It was the only place that gave me a chance. Nicholas sighed. I'm sorry, Peace. Peace wiped her eyes and forced a smile. It's okay. Life goes on. Nicholas studied her. She had been through so much, yet she still held her head high. You're stronger than you realize, he said. She looked at him, surprised. He smiled. And don't worry about Sophia. She come around. She is a good woman, just that at times she can react out of anger. Peace wasn't so sure, yet she nodded. Days turned into weeks. Peace settled into her job, but Sophia made sure to remind her that she was unwanted. She would leave dirty dishes for Peace to wash. She would complain about the food, even when Nicholas praised it. She would glare at Peace whenever she passed by. One evening, Nicholas complimented Peace on a new dish she had made. "This is incredible," he said. "You really outdid yourself. Your mother truly trained you well." Wife material 1,000 yards. Sophia, who had been silently eating, suddenly dropped her fork. "Enough," she snapped. Nicholas frowned. "What's wrong now?" Sophia turned to him. "Ever since you brought her here, you've been acting differently." "What's the meaning of that word? Wife material 1,000 yards. Or the meaning of her mother trained her well. Didn't my own mother train me well?" Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "Differently how?" "You are taking all these things too far. I am only complimenting her cooking skills. You defend her, you compliment her, you spend time talking to her. Now you have indirectly told her that my mom didn't train me well." "Sophia, when did I say that? So you think those compliments means nothing?" Nicholas sighed. "Sophia, she's just doing her job." Sophia folded her arms. "I don't like it." Nicholas exhaled. "You're being unreasonable." Sophia shot up from her chair. "Maybe I am, but I don't care. Either she leaves, or I do." A tense silence filled the room. Nicholas stared at her. "Are you seriously asking me to choose?" Sophia lifted her chin. "Yes." Nicholas looked at Peace, who sat frozen, her heart pounding. Then he turned back to Sophia. His voice was calm but firm. "If you want to leave, I won't stop you." Sophia's eyes widened. Peace's breath caught in her throat. And just like that, everything changed. For a moment, the entire room was silent. Sophia stared at Nicholas in disbelief. The man she had loved, the man who had always done whatever she wanted, was now choosing a stranger over her. "You can't be serious," she whispered. Nicholas sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Sophia, you gave me an ultimatum. What did you expect me to say?" Sophia's lips trembled. "I expected you to choose me. I am your fiancé." Peace felt like an intruder in their argument, but she couldn't leave. Her hands were clenched together, her heart racing. Nicholas looked at Sophia, his expression unreadable. "I care about you, Sophia, but I won't throw Peace out just because you don't like her. She's done nothing wrong." Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, I see what's happening here." Her eyes flickered toward Peace. "You're falling for her, aren't you?" Peace's eyes widened. "No, that's not true. I would never." "Enough," Sophia cut her off. "I don't want to hear a word from you." Nicholas sighed. "Sophia, you're being unreasonable." Sophia shook her head. "I won't stay here and watch this happen." Without another word, she turned on her heels and stormed up the stairs. A few minutes later, she came back down with a small suitcase. Nicholas watched her in disbelief. "You're really leaving?" Sophia lifted her chin. "I told you, Nicholas. Either she goes or I do." Nicholas's jaw tightened. "Sophia, don't do this." But she didn't answer. Instead, she walked past him, grabbed her car keys, and left. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house. Peace sat frozen, her entire body tense. "Sir, I should leave." Nicholas shook his head. "No, Peace, none of this is your fault." "But..." Nicholas sighed and rubbed his forehead. "I need a moment to think." He stood and left the dining room, leaving Peace alone with her thoughts. Days passed, and Sophia didn't return. At first, Nicholas was quiet, lost in thought. Peace noticed the sadness in his eyes, but he never spoke about it. She focused on her work. She cooked, cleaned, and stayed out of Nicholas's way as much as possible. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, Nicholas walked into the kitchen. "Peace," he said softly. She turned, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, sure." He hesitated, then sighed. "You don't have to call me sir. Just Nicholas is fine." Peace hesitated. "All right, Nicholas." He gave her a small smile. "Thank you for staying." She looked down. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." Nicholas studied her for a moment. "You do now. This is your home for as long as you want it to be." Peace's throat tightened. No one had ever told her that before. She blinked rapidly and nodded. "Thank you." Weeks later, Peace was in the garden picking fresh vegetables when she heard a car pull into the driveway. She turned and her heart nearly stopped. Sophia stepped out of the car. She looked different. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced with hesitation. She clutched her handbag tightly, her gaze scanning the house. Peace quickly wiped her hands on her dress and stepped forward. Miss Sophia? Sophia's eyes met hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, to Peace's surprise, Sophia sighed. I need to see Nicholas. Peace nodded and led her inside. Nicholas was in the study, reading over some business documents. When he looked up and saw Sophia, his expression remained neutral. Sophia, he said simply. Sophia took a deep breath. I made a mistake. Nicholas leaned back in his chair. Which mistake? Giving me an ultimatum or leaving. Sophia winced. Both. Silence stretched between them. Nicholas sighed and stood. Sophia, I never wanted you to leave. But I also wasn't going to throw someone innocent into the streets just to please you. Sophia lowered her gaze. I know. Nicholas studied her for a moment. So why are you here? Sophia swallowed. Because I love you. And I miss you. Nicholas let out a slow breath. Sophia ... double quotes. He shook his head. I don't know if things can go back to the way they were. Sophia's lips trembled. You don't love me anymore. Nicholas was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed. I loved the version of you that was kind and understanding. But the woman who walked out on me because she didn't get her way, I don't know if I can love that woman. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. I can change. Nicholas studied her, then glanced at Peace, who stood quietly in the corner, watching everything unfold. Finally, he turned back to Sophia. Maybe you can. But right now, I need time to think. Sophia nodded slowly. Okay. She turned and left without another word. That night, Peace sat on the balcony, staring at the stars. Nicholas joined her. Are you okay? He asked. Peace smiled slightly. I should be asking you that. Nicholas chuckled. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a while. Then, Nicholas turned to her. Peace, can I ask you something? She nodded. Of course. He hesitated, then said softly, have you ever been in love? Peace blinked, caught off guard. No, she admitted. I never had time for that. Nicholas smiled. Neither did I until now. Peace's heart skipped a beat. She turned to him, her breath catching in her throat. Nicholas, what are you saying? He met her gaze. I think I'm falling in love with you. Peace's eyes widened. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. She was falling in love with him too. Peace's heart pounded in her chest. Nicholas had just said the words she never expected to hear. I think I'm falling in love with you. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Nicholas sighed and ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry if this is too sudden. I just ... I had to tell you. Peace lowered her gaze, gripping the railing of the balcony. Nicholas, I don't know what to say. He gave a small, sad smile. You don't have to say anything right now. I just wanted to be honest. Peace swallowed hard. She had spent so long walking through life alone, always moving, always searching for a place to belong. And now, here was this man, a man she had never expected to be close to, telling her that he had feelings for her. Could she allow herself to feel the same? She took a shaky breath. I need time. Nicholas nodded. Take all the time you need. They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken emotions settling between them. The next day, Peace was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard a knock on the door. She wiped her hands on a towel and went to open it. Sophia stood there. Peace's stomach twisted. Miss Sophia ... Sophia didn't waste time. She pushed past Peace and marched into the house. Where's Nicholas? She demanded. Peace hesitated. He's upstairs. Call him, Sophia ordered. Peace bit her lip, unsure if she should. But before she could decide, Nicholas appeared at the top of the stairs. Sophia, his voice was firm. What are you doing here? Sophia turned to him, her eyes pleading. Nicholas, please, can we talk? Nicholas sighed and descended the stairs. What do you want, Sophia? She swallowed. I want to fix this. Us. Nicholas crossed his arms. And how do you propose we do that? Sophia took a deep breath. I was wrong to leave. I see that now. I let my pride get in the way, and I hurt you. But, Nicholas, I love you. Nicholas remained silent. Sophia's eyes flickered toward Peace, and her voice hardened slightly. You're not really considering her, are you? Nicholas's jaw tightened. Peace is not the problem here, Sophia. You are. Sophia flinched. I can change. Nicholas shook his head. I don't think you understand. It's not about changing to please me. It's about who you are. And the way you treated Peace, the way you treated me, showed me something I can't ignore. Sophia's lips trembled. So that's it. Nicholas sighed. I don't know what you expected, Sophia. Tears welled up in her eyes. I expected you to fight for us. Nicholas's voice softened. I did, Sophia. But love isn't supposed to be a fight. It's supposed to be ... effortless. And with you, it's always been a battle. Sophia looked away, trying to compose herself. Finally, she turned back to him. Goodbye, Nicholas. She left without another word. In the weeks that followed, things between Nicholas and Peace slowly began to swell up like a break that was dipped inside water. She was no longer just his cook. They spent more time together. Nicholas would sit in the kitchen while she cooked, telling her stories about his childhood. Sometimes, she would catch him watching her with a look she couldn't quite define. One evening, they sat together in the garden, sipping tea. Nicholas glanced at her. Are you still thinking? Peace smiled softly. About what? He chuckled. About me. Peace looked down at her hands. Nicholas, I don't want to be another Sophia. I don't want you to wake up one day and regret this. Nicholas reached for her hand. You could never be another Sophia. And I will never regret choosing you. Peace's heart skipped a beat, and in that moment, she knew. She was in love with him, a love worth fighting for. Months passed, and their relationship blossomed. Nicholas treated Peace with a kindness she had never known. And for the first time in her life, she felt safe. She felt loved. One evening, Nicholas took her to a beautiful restaurant. As they ate, he reached across the table and took her hand. Peace, I don't want to wait any longer, he said. She blinked. Wait for what? Nicholas smiled. To make you my wife. Peace's breath caught in her throat. Nicholas ... He pulled out a velvet box and opened it, revealing a beautiful diamond ring. Will you marry me? Tears filled Peace's eyes. She had spent her entire life searching for a place to belong. And now, she had found it. With a trembling smile, she whispered, yes. Nicholas slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. And for the first time, Peace knew. She was finally home. The day of Peace and Nicholas's wedding was nothing short of magical. White roses lined the aisle, their delicate fragrance filling the air. Soft choir music played in the background, adding to the enchantment of the moment. Peace stood before the mirror in her dressing room, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and disbelief. She was dressed in a breathtaking white gown, simple yet elegant, just as she had always imagined. The fabric hugged her slender figure before flowing gracefully to the ground, and the veil cascaded down her back like a waterfall of silk. Tears welled in her eyes as she traced the edges of her dress with trembling fingers. She had never imagined a day like this for herself. Once, she had wandered the streets with no direction, sleeping in a restaurant, working tirelessly just to survive. Now, she was about to become the wife of a billionaire, a man who cherished her, who saw her worth when she had long forgotten it herself. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Are you ready? A familiar voice asked. She turned to find Nicholas standing at the doorway, looking breathtaking in his fitted black tuxedo. His eyes held that same tenderness that made her heart swell. Peace smiled. I am. Nicholas stepped closer, took her hands in his, and kissed them softly. You look beautiful, my love. A tear slipped down her cheek. I still can't believe this is real. He chuckled. Believe it, because after today, you'll never walk alone again. As they stood at the altar, exchanging vows before family, friends, and well-wishers, Peace felt something shift deep within her. She wasn't just a girl who had been abandoned by fate anymore. She was loved. She was chosen. She was home. Later that night, after the wedding reception had ended and they were finally alone in their luxurious honeymoon suite, Peace sat beside Nicholas, her fingers intertwined with his. Nicholas, she began hesitantly, there's something I need to tell you. He turned to her with a soft smile. You can tell me anything, my love. She took a deep breath. Do you remember the day you found me walking along the street? The day you asked why I wasn't working at the restaurant anymore. Nicholas nodded. Of course. You told me your boss let you go, but you never told me why. Peace swallowed hard. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to cause any problems. But, Nicholas, it was Sophia who made my boss sack me. Nicholas's brows furrowed. What? She nodded, her voice shaking slightly. I accidentally spilled water on her that day when she came to the restaurant. It was a mistake, and I apologized, but she slapped me and went straight to my boss, demanding that he fire me. She told him she would stop coming to the restaurant if I remained there. Since she and her fiancé were the restaurant's biggest customers, my boss had no choice but to let me go. Nicholas's jaw tightened, and a storm brewed in his eyes. She did that to you? Peace nodded. Yes. And that's why I was out on the street when you found me. That's why I had nowhere to go. I think that was the actual reason why she detested me so much. Nicholas clenched his fists. I can't believe her. She always had a sense of entitlement, but to go that far, Peace touched his hand gently. It's in the past now. If that hadn't happened, I never would have met you the way I did. I wouldn't change that for anything. Nicholas exhaled, his anger slowly fading as he looked into her eyes. You're right, but it still hurts me to know what she put you through. Peace smiled softly. I have you now. That's all that matters. Nicholas pulled her into his arms and held her close. And you'll never have to suffer like that again, I promise. When news of Nicholas and Peace's wedding reached Sophia, she was in the middle of brunch with some of her friends. One of them, scrolling through social media, gasped, "Oh my God, Sophia, did you hear?" Sophia, sipping her drink lazily, barely glanced up. Hear what? Her friend turned the phone towards her. Nicholas just got married. Sophia froze. The color drained from her face as she snatched the phone and stared at the screen. There, in a beautifully captured wedding photo, was Nicholas. His arm wrapped protectively around his bride Peace. Sophia's hands trembled. No. It can't be. Another friend sighed dramatically. Oh, but it is. And to think, that's the same girl you had fired from the restaurant. Sophia's heart clenched painfully. She remembered Peace vividly, her meekness, her simplicity, the way she had looked so small and powerless that day when she had slapped her and ordered her dismissal. The way her boss had told her that God would put her in a better place. And now, that same girl was standing beside the man she had once loved. Sophia slammed the phone down on the table, her appetite suddenly gone. One of her friends smirked. Wow, Sophia. You lost him to a girl you thought was beneath you. Another laughed. And she's Mrs. Nicholas now. Life is funny, isn't it? Sophia stood up abruptly. I need to go. She left the restaurant in a hurry, her heart racing. As she walked aimlessly down the street, bitter tears stung her eyes. She had thought Nicholas would always be there, waiting for her. She had thought she could walk back into his life whenever she pleased. But now, he was gone, and she had no one to blame but herself. While Sophia drowned in regret, Nicholas and Peace built a beautiful life together. Nicholas ensured Peace never had to struggle again. He encouraged her to pursue her dreams, and together, they opened a restaurant, one that Peace managed with grace and passion. Their love grew stronger with each passing day, and in every moment of their lives, Peace remained grateful for the journey that had led her to him. Because sometimes, the most unexpected paths lead to the most beautiful destinations. Hello champions, I hope you enjoyed our stories. Please hit the like button, leave a comment below and subscribe to our channel. Thanks.